Good morning and welcome to Predictive Analytics for Inbound Marketers. I'm Katie Robert, CEO and co-founder of Brain Trust Insights. Before we get into a deep dive of predictive analytics, I wanted to just walk through the hierarchy of analytics so that we all had the same baseline understanding of how analytics are mapped together and how they work in succession. So it's structured very much like a ladder. You start with that bottom rung and work your way up. Now, this bottom rung is the most important. It's that foundational data set. It's your quantitative data descriptive of what happened. So these data sets would include things such as your Google Analytics data or Adobe Analytics. It would include your CRM information, or it would also include your email marketing and your excuse me, your social media data. So these are all the quantitative data sets that tell you what happened. The next rung of the ladder as you work your way up is diagnostic. So why did it happen? This is your qualitative data. This could be your customer support call logs. These could be additional consumer surveys, market research, anything that tells you the behavior of your audience or your customers. The next rung up is predictive. What will happen next? And we'll be spending more time on this particular rung throughout this session. Once you have predictive, then you have prescription. What should we do next? And then this last rung is proactive, which actually we're about 5 to 10 years off. It doesn't fully exist yet. So let's look at all of these together. What we tend to see is that a lot of companies are stuck at this descriptive stage of what happened. They don't have that infrastructure set up correctly, or they don't know that if they have all of the pieces. So they're not even really capturing all of the data that they need to figure out even what happened. And when companies are in that position, they tend to just react and react and react, and it's really hard to put a plan together. And if you are putting a plan together, then you're just kind of guessing and making assumptions because you never get beyond that what happened. You can't dig into why did it happen? What are those behaviors of the customers that are going to lead me to what will happen next, which is predictive. So I just wanted to set the stage for here's the hierarchy of analytics, and let's dig into predictive analytics a little bit more. So we've all been there. Actually, I've specifically been here. I'm featured in this picture and points if you can figure out which one I am. It's not that hard. So we've all sat in a meeting with a manager or a client where they've talked about, I want to reach my audience every single way possible. I want to send them an email blast. I want to hit them on social media. I want to send them something in the mail. I want to call them up. I want to make sure that they can't ignore us and you just get right in their face. And you're sitting there listening to all of this thinking, you know what, that's probably not the best way to approach our audience or our customers. They're probably going to get annoyed with us. So how do we refine that a bit more? How do we cut through the noise? Well, that's where predictive analytics can help you determine what to do when. Use it as a guide so that you're not blasting your customers with things. Honestly, anytime someone says, let's blast our customers, it's probably not a great thing. So what's the problem with data analysis? Well, like we talked about with that hierarchy of data analytics, a lot of companies get stuck at that bottom rung of descriptive analytics and what happened. So the majority of data analysis is just looking backwards. So imagine you're driving a car. You're supposed to be looking forwards, but in this scenario, your car is moving forwards, but you're looking over your shoulder behind you. So ultimately, what's going to happen is you're going to crash. You're going to hit a tree. You're going to hit another car. You're not going to know what's coming in front of you. And by only using that historical data, if something changes right in front of you, you won't ever know. So if you're looking behind you and you assume that if I just keep driving straight, I'll be fine, you won't see that car that's just cut you off. You won't see that suddenly the road is veering to the left. And that's a problem. And that's how, unfortunately, a lot of companies are operating these days. They're just operating with, well, I know what happened behind me, so I can guess at what happens ahead of me. It's like driving with your eyes closed, and that's never a good idea. So how do you prevent that car crash? Well, first and foremost, you get your foundational data as tightened up as possible. You make sure that you're confident in what that data set looks like. And then you can move on to why did it happen? And then furthermore, you can look at those predictive forecastings to figure out what might be lying down the road ahead of me. Is there going to be a tree? Is there a car? Is there something that I can look at and that I'm going to need to veer around? Or is the road clear and straight ahead of me and I can just keep driving forward? We use predictive analytics in our everyday life, probably without even realizing it. A really great example of everyday predictive analytics is a weather forecast. Now, a weather forecast is something that if you're like me, you're looking at every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, to try to figure out what's going on. Just this morning, I stepped outside and I was like, wow, it's actually kind of cool, but I thought we were supposed to have a heat wave. So I continually started to check the forecast to figure out when's the next time I should go outside, or should I spend all of my outside time right now? And so a predictive forecast is really just that. It's a forecast. It's a guide. It's telling you, here's what is likely to happen. But until you're in that moment, you don't really know if it's going to be the thing. So a forecast can tell you whether or not you should bring an umbrella, but you might not need that umbrella. But if you don't bring the umbrella, you're going to be caught in the rain. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone's clear that a predictive forecast is a guide. It's not that magical answer. There are two different types of predictive analytics. There's a driver analysis, and then there's a time series analysis. And these two types of analysis answer two specific questions: why and when. Driver analysis answers the question of why. It's not the same why as what are the behaviors of our customers, but it's why in terms of it's a series of events that leads you to that next thing. So why on Tuesday do all of our tweets suddenly go viral? So you would use a driver analysis to start to pick apart the different actions that lead to that so that you can replicate it. And then you have time series analysis, which is when is something likely to happen? And that's that time-based on this week, on this day, in this month. And that's the analysis that for marketers is a little bit more commonly used. And so let's dig into that a little bit more. So how does it work? Well, when you're doing a time series analysis, the high level way that the prediction comes around is it's a series of math equations. It's statistics. So you use historical data and you project it forward. So for example, you could use 5 years worth of Google Trends data. You could feed it into this predictive algorithm that either you've created or you've bought off the shelf. And what it will give you is a projection forward of the next 365 days, or you can look at just smaller pockets of time, such as 30, 60, or 90 days, depending on how you would like to be structuring your plan. So where do you get started? Well, you have to start at the beginning, which is with what's the project, what's the question that you're trying to answer. You need to be able to set the strategy, understand the goals, and what's the desired outcome. Because what you don't want to do is just start running predictive analysis and throwing it against the wall and hoping that something will stick. So with any project, predictive or not, you need to start at the beginning with what's the question that we're trying to answer? Why are we doing this? And ideally, you would be setting outcomes that align very closely with the business outcomes and the business goals. So the next step is to pull data. Without data, you can't run a forecast because it's based on mathematical principles. So different types of data that you can use for predictive analysis are, as I mentioned, your own proprietary Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics data. You can use your CRM data. You can use your email marketing data or your marketing automation data. You can even use your sales and revenue data. If you don't have access to any of that data for some reason, you can use publicly available data sources such as Google Trends data, which is something that we at Brain Trust Insights are very fond of. If you're not familiar with Google Trends data, it's a very useful data set and website for marketers, not just for pulling data for predictive analytics, but just in general. So go check it out if you haven't done so. The next step is to prepare your data set. So maybe it is exported as a text file and you need to transform it into a CSV, depending on how your algorithm is structured. So you just want to make sure that you're doing all of that upfront work to make sure that the dates are structured correctly or the data is structured correctly so that when you feed it into your algorithm, it just runs very smoothly. So the next step is to pick your variables. So you can actually use driver analysis for this to figure out which variable do I want to be predicting on. So an example of that, again, sort of that on Tuesdays, everything that we retweet goes viral, we would use a driver analysis to determine that that's what we're after that aligns with our goals and our outcomes. So once we know what that variable is, retweets on Tuesdays, then we could run our time series forecast to determine what that actually looks like, what other elements we need to be doing in order to get that desired outcome of viral tweets. And then you run your predictive algorithm. So you've pulled your data, you've prepared it, you've determined what it is that you want to predict on, and then you can run the prediction. Now, if you have multiple questions that you're trying to answer, the best practice is not to run one prediction and try to answer multiple questions. Run multiple versions of the prediction to answer each individual question because you don't want it to get it muddied up. You want to try to keep your predictive analytics pretty straightforward, answering one question at a time. And lastly, you build your plan. So you have all this information, and now you can start to plan for what it is you want to do, how you want to execute, and really what's coming down the road. So a lot of companies, if not all companies, go through those ebbs and flows of we're really busy, we are outright, I'm going to pull my hair out, or we have a little bit of breathing room. So what do you typically do when you have that slower period or that breathing room? Well, you start to reset, you start to rethink and plan and prep for those times when you might have crisis comms or you might just be slammed with 20 different clients needing something all at once. So using a predictive forecast can help you make the most of your time most efficiently during those slower times. And that's actually something that we've been doing at Brain Trust Insights. Anytime we have a pocket of a little bit of downtime, we're planning ahead for when we won't have that time. So for example, we've spent the last couple of weeks knowing that we would be traveling. I'm an inbound and my business partner is actually speaking at Content Marketing World this week. And so we've been preparing content. We've been recording podcasts. We've been creating blog content. We've just been making sure that when these busy times come, all we have to do is hit go on something that's already scheduled or slightly tweak it, but we're not worrying too much about what it is that we have to do right at that moment. And so we've been using predictive calendars to determine what's the content we should be writing or what are the questions that we need to be prepared to answer for our audience members. And this is an example of a predictive forecast that we actually used over the summer. So what you're looking at here is when will people be reading their email? So we took a look at Google Trends data to try to figure out when will people be looking for how to set up their out of office calendar. And we used that technique because we didn't have access to all of these different companies that we cared about and what their email behaviors were. So, we took a high level look at what we assumed would be those up periods and down periods. And the way that you read a chart like this is so you have in the middle your median, and anything above it are those high volume times. Anything below it are when people are less likely to be doing the type of behavior that you're looking for. And so in this red box here is right around the July 4th week and then the subsequent weeks afterwards for the summer. So we were able to determine, okay, if we're planning ahead for all of our email newsletters, the week of July 4th is probably when people are going to be reading their email the least. So when you have a situation like that, you really have a couple of options. One, you can proceed normally. Two, you can do nothing. Or three, you can modify your plan and try something a little bit different. And that's what we did. So we said, you know what? We're still going to go ahead and send email anyway. We want people to still remember who we are and have a little bit of that awareness. But knowing that people are less likely to be reading email, let's just scale back the newsletter so that they can just skim it for information. So we probably took about 25% of the content that we normally share and put it into that newsletter. And we put the subject line as the worst performing newsletter of the year. We thought it was pretty funny, but we're not comedians, we're data scientists, so perhaps the joke fell flat. That said, it was one of our best performing newsletters of the year so far this year in terms of open rates. And we actually did get some positive feedback because what we were able to do by having that information was we were able to stand out amongst the noise and rise to the top of people's inboxes because they were like, oh, hey, what's this? This is something that's a little bit different. I wasn't expecting it. So keep that in mind as we go through the different ways that you can use predictive analytics throughout the customer journey. But before we get into that, you're probably thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great if I knew the highs and lows of when people would most likely be reading their email? Well, today is your lucky day, and we've done the work for you. So in a couple of slides, I'm going to recommend that you take a picture. So start to get your cameras ready. So in this slide, what you see here is, so you have that median line and you have your highs and lows. So the lows are when you should be either sending less email, a scaled back email, or not sending email at all. And that preference is up to you and your company. So those 4 time points are when people are the least likely to be opening their email between now and next August. And then these green high points are when people are most likely to be reading their email. So that's when you want to have major announcements, big offers, those types of things. Okay, so if you have your cameras ready, here are those dates outlined of when not to send email and when you should be sending email. Everybody good? Great. So as I mentioned, you can use a predictive forecast through every single stage of the customer journey. If you're not familiar with the customer journey, it's essentially the different steps that a person takes from awareness to purchase to becoming a repeat customer, where they're finding out about your company and they're deciding whether or not they're going to be working with you, signing up with you, or purchasing something from you. The first step of the customer journey, sometimes called the buyer's journey or the owner's journey, is awareness. They need to know who you are. They need to understand what it is that you do, what you bring to the table, and they need to find out about you. So in a consumer customer journey, this typically means that they're searching on the internet for you or they're looking on social media. And so what you need to do in that situation is have content created that is going to answer the questions that they might have that are going to make them become aware of you and your company. So what you see is we did a forecast for cheese of the week because honestly, who doesn't love cheese? I love cheese, but cheese doesn't love me. I'm actually lactose intolerant, but that doesn't mean I can't appreciate cheese. So what you have is a whole bunch of different types of cheeses. And you can see for the week of September 2nd, mozzarella is what people are going to be looking for. So we used Google Trends data to determine people's search habits. So when you have information like that, what you would want to do at that awareness stage is create content that's helpful. So what do I do with mozzarella? What are mozzarella recipes? How do I store mozzarella? What are the different kinds of mozzarella? So you have that content created that you can either post on your blog or share across social. And then the other thing that you can do with a forecast like this is it will help you determine, based on those search trends, how much money you should be putting behind certain types of ads. So if you have ads specifically around mozzarella to bring people to your website to learn more, so in the week of September 2nd, you would want to be putting more money behind those mozzarella ads and then tuning them down when people aren't necessarily looking for mozzarella, but they're looking for something else. So the next step of the customer journey is consideration. So someone has found out about you, they know a little bit about you, and so maybe now they're signing up for your newsletter to get more information on a regular basis. So again, this is that same, when will people be reading their email forecast? So what you would use this for is to determine, when should I be sending those newsletters? Perhaps this is going to help you understand the frequency of when you should be sending them. So maybe you thought originally, I should be sending a weekly newsletter, but really based on people's patterns of when they'll be reading their email, a monthly newsletter might be a better course of action because I don't want to be spending all of that time to create something that nobody's ever going to see. If you do have a lot of email marketing data and you have been historically sending a lot of newsletters, then you could actually be using your open rate as a metric to be forecasting on. So the next step is evaluation. So the person's become aware of you, they've signed up and they've learned a little bit more, and now they're evaluating and now they're saying, you know what, I'm ready to raise my hand and say, I want to work with you, I want to buy something from you. So you can run a predictive forecast on your lead gen patterns. So what you're looking at here is when someone has raised their hand and said, I want to work with you. And you can see there's peaks and valleys to be expected. So this isn't telling you exactly, I'm going to get this number of leads this week, but what this is giving you is an opportunity to plan ahead for when I'm getting more leads, I should be just planning for when we're getting less leads. And when we're getting less leads, we should be executing those plans to continue to convert more people. And that might be more retargeting ads, or that might be more webinars or things for people to sign up for. That are really going to help them move forward down the funnel for them to say, I want to work with you, I want to buy something from you. So once they've evaluated and they've said, I want to work with you, then they're ready to swipe the credit card and they're ready to make a purchase. And once they've made a purchase, then you start to have that revenue and e-commerce data. So again, having this information forecasted out really gives you the opportunity to plan ahead for when you're not bringing in as much revenue. What can we as a company do to continue to encourage people to purchase or make repeat purchases? And then when the peaks are lower, when the values are lower rather, then you're executing those plans. And so now you want to have those loyal customers. You want to have that staff in place to make sure that the customers that you do have remain happy. So you can take a look at your call log data, your volume data for customer service complaints. Think about a company like AAA where they have that roadside service and all they do all day long, 24/7, is take calls from people who are stranded on the side of the road. That's a core part of their company. So what they would use this information for is to plan ahead. So if it's their highest volume season, they probably shouldn't be making major infrastructure updates so that their website isn't working. They should probably staff up or make sure that people aren't taking long vacations so that they're down a few call operators. They should make sure that they have the right number of dispatchers or tow truck drivers. So having a forecast like this really helps you plan ahead internally to make sure that you are prepared to give the best service possible to your customers. And then you have that loyalty, so repeat customers, high value customers. So what you're looking at first is, this is an example of a driver analysis. So you have a couple of variables where you have your x-axis is your recency. So when a customer was last purchased something, when they have purchased multiple things. And then you have value, which is the y-axis, and that is how much the purchase was worth. So this is broken down into 4 different clusters. So the top cluster, cluster 4, is your high value, high recency customers. So those are your loyalists. And what you would do with that is you would then run a time series analysis to figure out when you can best work with those customers, hit them with more ads, send them email, those types of things, what those behavioral patterns are. And then another cluster that you should probably pay attention to are those lower value, less recent customers. So what can you do with those customers to start to bring up their value, to start to make them repeat customers? So having the opportunity to run a driver analysis and then a time series analysis really gives you in-depth insights and helps you create more efficient plans to keep your customers coming back for more things. And then lastly is the evangelism stage of the customer journey. So we live in an age now where if a company doesn't have a presence on digital properties such as Facebook or Yelp, then we as consumers have a hard time believing that they exist at all because everybody's on the internet. And so what you would be able to do in this stage is run a forecast on the volume of Yelp reviews, for example. And so it's not necessarily telling you what those Yelp reviews are saying, but it's telling you as a business what to expect in terms of seasonality or what that cycle looks like. So for example, if you're a restaurant and you see in your forecast, okay, between the month of June and July, we typically get the highest number of Yelp reviews and we can expect that this year, then maybe that's the time when you need to add on additional wait staff, or perhaps it's not the best time to start experimenting with the menu, knowing that you're going to have a lot of volume of people coming through the door. So a practical application of this for all the different stages that we've talked through is content marketing. And that's typically where you would start to introduce predictive analytics into your practice, into your company. So this is actually a screenshot of the predictive forecast that we use at Brain Trust Insights. And so when I mentioned that during those downtimes, we were preparing content and we were recording podcasts, this is actually the calendar that we were using to do that. So what we were able to do was we did our SEO research. We determined the terms that we wanted to be known for specifically at our company. And then we took all of those terms and we ran a predictive forecast using Google Trends data, so search volume data. And what we were able to come up with was an actionable calendar that would let us know when to do certain things. So for example, during this week, the week of September 2nd, we see that people are most likely searching for Google Data Studio. So we wanted to be prepared with content around that, such as what are the best practices for Google Data Studio? How do I get started with Google Data Studio? How do I put together a dashboard and those types of things? And then we were also able to project out a few more weeks to say, what were some of the other things that people would be looking for? So we were prepared to record podcasts around what is data science, or create content around using R for data science and those types of things. So that's a very practical application for how you would use a predictive forecast in your everyday workflow. And so what we have also is a very specific case study. So we worked with a wine company. So they created products for the major product lines such as Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, Merlot, and Pinot Noir. And so what we were able to do was, again, using search data, we were able to determine in a 30-day forecast what their audience was likely to be searching for so that they could have very specific actions to take. So we were able to project forward and come up with these specific recommendations. First being Chardonnay content should be in place and optimized for search by April 1st. So what we saw with this is that starting in April, people were going to be looking for Chardonnay a lot more. So this company needed to be prepared with content. They needed to have ads and email campaigns going out. They needed to be prepared to have Chardonnay on social and making sure that there were different touch points on different platforms for people to be able to find them and information about the wine that they cared about the most. We also saw that people were going to be searching for Cabernet Sauvignon a bit less. So if they have ads running, if they have campaigns, then they can start to wind those down and really refocus on Chardonnay. And then the last thing was to start Pinot Noir content production, because towards the end of April, that people would be searching for that particular type of wine a bit more. So being able to plan ahead and not be caught right when people are searching for something and have nothing prepared was really what we were able to provide to this company. So they were able to make those plans and have a good sense of what their audience would be doing and what they would care about the most. So there are just a couple of caveats about predictive that are worth mentioning. First and foremost, you need to use your judgment. So a predictive forecast is a supplemental data set. It's not the answer. It's not the exact thing. You know the most about your industry. You know the most about your clients. So if a predictive forecast is telling you to stay the course and go straight, you might say, you know what, but I know that this other thing is coming, so I'm just going to veer to the right a little bit. And that's okay. You still need to use your judgment when using a predictive forecast as part of your planning. You can expect the unexpected and you can't plan for everything. So there are things in this world that we have no control over, but they have global impact. It might be a natural disaster. It might be a stock market crash. It might be a zombie apocalypse, or it might be an alien invasion. These are things that could happen, but we don't know that they're going to happen. And if they do happen, okay, well, we're all screwed. And we can't expect to have consistent data collection when those things are happening. So expect the unexpected and just know that there are going to be interruptions within your data set so that your predictive forecast might not be perfect. And lastly, predictive is not a crystal ball. It's not an exact answer. So again, if you think back to the weather, you could step outside and the weather forecast says it's going to rain, But right now, it could be 86 and sunny, and you're thinking, well, what the heck? You said it was going to rain. So it's not a crystal ball, it's a guide. It's really to help get you to a good place and point you in the right direction. So, what is predictive analytics? It is a supplemental data set to help you create better planning so that you're not always looking behind you, but that you have the ability to look ahead and try to determine what's coming down the line. What it isn't, it's not magic, it's not something that happens behind the curtain. It's math. It's a statistical analysis of historical data that projects it forward. And when to use it? Well, you can use it every day. You can use it through every single phase of the customer journey to help you make better plans and more efficient decisions. So if you have questions, or if you want to know more about predictive analytics, you can give us a call, or you can reach us at braintrustinsights.com. You can follow us on various social media channels. You can sign up for our podcast or our newsletter. We talk about predictive analytics a lot because we really find it to be a very useful tool in a lot of different situations.
If you want help with your company's data and analytics, visit braintrustinsights.com today and let us know how we can help you.